The Mirror Arrow Necromancer is a build that uses the Transfigure Gem's Mirror Arrow of Bombarding Clones and Blink Arrow of Prismatic Clones. These skill gems each summon 3 clones that fire rain of arrows and elemental hit respectively. With a total of 6 clones firing multiple projectiles at a time, this build is able to easily scale damage through added flat lightning and increased minion damage modifiers. This build takes advantage of the Adorned Unique Jewel to scale the flat lightning and minion damage from magic jewels, and then uses a Voltaxic Rift to fully convert the lightning damage to chaos damage, allowing the build to fully bypass energy shield modifiers on enemies. So the way this build works is that you have a double 5-link setup with both Mirror Arrow of Bombarding Clones and Blink Arrow of Prismatic Clones within the same 6-linked item. You'll summon your clones by alternating the cooldowns between Mirror Arrow and Blink Arrow in order to blink around the map while simultaneously decimating your enemies. Although the Transfigure Gems each have a maximum clone limit of 3, the duration of these clones far exceed that of the traditional gem, pushing up to as high as 32 seconds per clone instead of the usual 3 seconds. The application of high duration minion scaling damage via rain of arrows and elemental hits allows the build to achieve significant upfront damage scaling without relying on things like damage over time mechanics in order to sustain optimal damage uptime. It is no surprise that this is one of the most popular Necromancer builds as of patch 3.24, and it goes without saying that I highly recommend players try out this build if they ever get the chance to during this league. Now for the main skill setup, you want to have both Mirror Arrow of Bombarding Clones and Blink Arrow of Prismatic Clones linked together in the same 6th link. The support gems that will be linked to both of these skills will be Awakened Minion Damage, Fresh Meat, Momentum, and Volatility. Now for the aura setup, this build runs Determination, Defiance Banner, Purity of Elements, Precision, and Haste. The Haste aura will be linked to a Divine Blessing support, allowing the use of this aura without the need to reserve it on mana. For the utility gems, this build has Assassin's Mark for single target boss fights, Spirit Offering for more crit and crit multi, Flame Dash as another mobility skill, and a cast when damage taken Molten Shell setup. Finally, for the Animate Guardian Raised Spectre setup, this build has a 6th link with the Animate Guardian Raised Spectre, Empower, Minion Life, Meat Shield, and Feeding Frenzy. For the Spectres, there are 3 main Spectres that I usually look at depending on the build's needs. These Spectres are the Carnage Chieftain from the Old Fields in Act 2, the Host Chieftain from the Southern Forest in Act 6, or the Arena Master from a Warlord influenced map. The Carnage Chieftain can generate frenzy charges, the Host Chieftain can generate power charges, and the Arena Master provides a buff granting 20% increased attack speed, movement speed, and attack damage. If my minions currently have no way of generating charges, I will go with the Carnage and Host Chieftains, which will generate frenzy and power charges for my minions. However, once I'm able to get access to a quiver that generates frenzy charges on crit, I would prefer to raise the Arena Master and Host Chieftain instead. Now for the Animate Guardian setup, there are 2 main setups that I usually like to have for this, the low budget setup or the high budget setup. For the low budget setup, the Animate Guardian will have a Dying Breath, Leer Cast, Southbound Rare Boots with Brittle Implicit, and a rare body armor with some generic life and resistance stats. For the high budget setup, the Animate Guardian will run a Kingmaker, Garb of the Ephemeral, Mask of the Stitched Demon, Vixen's Entrapment with Despair on Hit Corrupted Implicit, and a pair of rare boots with Life, Chaos Res, and Brittle Ground implicit. For the Masteries, this build uses the following 4 Masteries from the passive tree: plus 50 to maximum life, 10% physical damage from hits taken as chaos damage, auras from skills have 10% increase effects, and Blink Arrow and Mirror Arrow have 100% increased cooldown recovery rates. For the Ascendancy Passives, this build uses Mindless Aggression, Unnatural Strength, Bone Barrier, and Commander of Darkness. However, if you decide to level the build with Detonate Dead first like I did, I recommend going with Plaguebringer and Corpse Pact first and then respecking into the other passives later once you swap into Mirror Arrow. For the bow, as I mentioned earlier, this build will be going with a Voltaxic Rift. This bow allows for 100% lightning to chaos damage conversion and is a strong option for this build due to its shock scaling modifiers. I also like to enchant it with a Harvest Craft that provides additional crit chance based on weapon quality. Now for the quiver, I crafted this by purchasing a Broadhead Arrow Quiver with fractured attack speed and then spammed it with Deafening Essences of Torment until I hit T1 crit multi. Once I landed the T1 crit multi, I annulled the quiver until there was only the added flat lightning damage, attack speed, and crit multi modifiers on it. Then I bench crafted Cannot Roll attack modifiers, slammed it with 2 exalts for the life and increased damage with bow skills, and finally added the Frenzy on crit benchcraft. For the helmet, this build uses Devouring Diadem. Since the build reserves all of its mana with auras, the Eldritch Battery and Energy Shield provided by this helmet is what allows the build to use any of its skill, including the Haste Divine Blessing. The two veiled modifiers I like to get on this helmet are either Hybrid Elemental Chaos Res or Hybrid Attributes. For the body armor, this build uses the 4th vow. On top of granting additional chaos resistance and life regeneration, this item also applies armor to chaos damage taken from hits, which allows the build to scale its chaos max hit via armor sources from items and determination. For gloves, I brought Shagreen gloves with fractured spell suppression and spammed Essences of Sorrow on it until I hit a decent elemental resistance modifier. I also happened to get lucky with a T2 flat lightning prefix and an open prefix where I was able to benchcraft a plus 70 max life. The implicits I decided to roll on the gloves were additional spell suppression and minion damage. Now for the boots, I crafted these in a similar manner to the gloves by spamming Essences of Zeal for the movement speed until I hit T1 resistance and life. Since it rolled with an open prefix, I also benchcrafted a hybrid life mod for more maximum life. The Eldritch implicits I decided to roll on the boots were cooldown recovery rate of travel skills, which affects both mirror and blink arrow, and then movement speed. For the belt, this build uses a darkness enthroned. For the jewels socketed in this belt, I decided to prioritize dexterity, max life, and minion accuracy. If these stats were achieved elsewhere in the gear, I would recommend more offensive modifiers, such as minion flat lightning damage or minion attack speed. Now for the rings, I have an amethyst ring with high life resistances and an open prefix for non-channeling skills have less mana cost. And for the second ring, a friend of mine crafted this by purchasing a fractured bone ring and then spamming bound fossils until he hit T2 minion damage and attack speed with an open prefix for resistances. For the amulet, this build uses a Perkle's Toe to allow your minions' damage to be lucky, which means that for the purpose of damage calculations, their damage will be rolled twice and the higher outcome will be used in order to deal the damage. This effectively offsets the downside of using volatility support by skewing the average roll of damage dealt to the higher end of the range. The amulet will also be anointed with Inveterate to provide additional spell suppression and suppression effects. Now for the cluster jewel setup, this build runs one large cluster jewel with Renewal, Feasting Fiend, and Vicious Bite. I have seen other players use a cluster with Rotten Claws instead of Feasting Fiends to apply Impale. However, I'm not too sure how much more effective this notable is, especially considering that this build invests heavily into chaos and lightning damage rather than physical damage. For the jewels, this build takes advantage of the Adorned Unique Jewel. With 5 available jewel sockets on the tree for corrupted magic jewels, this build is able to achieve 215% increased minion damage and 230 added flat lightning damage from jewels alone. A Watcher's Eye with Precision and Purity of Elements provides additional crit multi and also a bit of physical damage shift to increase the build's physical max hit. Finally, a Glorious Vanity Sacrifice in the name of Zabakwa will give the build access to Divine Flesh and Cult of Chaos, which synergize incredibly well with the 4th vow by allowing armor to now apply to both elemental and chaos damage. Last but not least, we have the Flask setup. Aside from the Life Flask granting Corrupted Blood immunity, this build has a Jade Flask with reduced curse effect, a Granite Flask with increased movement speed, a Quicksilver Flask with increased evasion, and a Silver Flask with increased armor. And so that's all for this build guide. If you want to support more content like this, please leave me any feedback in the comments section below on how I can improve the guide. Thanks for watching the video, and I hope to see you all next time.